Thank you once again for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. I'm Jeff Zito. We are streaming on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. One of the number one shows on the Apple Podcast music interview chart. So please subscribe. Would love it if you gave us a 5-star rating. Leave a review. You can follow at youtube.com/the@celebrityjobber or on Instagram, celebrityjobber_podcast. You know, some people were destined to become who they are. For some people, it's just dumb luck. I think for my next guest, the legendary sports broadcaster Chris Myer, he knew what he wanted to do at an early age. We'll talk to him a little bit about how he got his start, of course, growing up in Miami. His new book, That Deserves a Wow, Untold Stories of Legends and Champions. Plus, of course, you know, we got to ask him what his first job was. He calls football games, baseball games, and had a tour on ESPN in the late 80s and early 90s. He is the legendary sportscaster Chris Myer, and my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
Hey, Chris, how's it going, man?
Good to talk to you. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. You know, I had a quick, as they say in our business, a quick cup of coffee at WQAM. You cut your teeth at WIOD, I understand?
Oh, yeah. Well, WKAT first, then WIOD. But WQAM was a classic that grew up listening to the rock and roll there. Jim Dunlap in the mornings. We're going way back, obviously. But yeah, that's a classic station and became later, you know, did news, sports, other stuff as well.
When I say a cup of coffee, Chris, I mean like literally maybe a month or so before I was out of there.
Okay. Sorry it didn't go well, but that's radio, the life of radio.
That's right. So was it always sports radio for you? Who made you want to get into this profession?
I just listened to the radio a lot, of the of course, music-wise, but then sports talk as well captivated me, and it gave me an outlet, becoming a young fanatic with sports, an outlet to listen. And then when I heard you could call in and actually talk about it, I started doing it at a young age with a deep voice, and I was like, man, this is, and people actually have jobs doing this. Not that I was thinking of a job at a young age, but as that went along, I was like, okay, I'm in high school here, where I could, something I'd want to do, and that's kind of what drove me. And through radio, worked my way through college to get on the ESPN and then Fox. But I always knew I kind of wanted to do this type of media thing because, and not just about the games, sports, but the people in sports. I was a big fan of interviewers and entertainment people, and this was a vehicle because I thought people in sports had a whole personality maybe that we weren't always seeing at the time, and wanted to bring that out. So those are the kinds of things I think that drove me.
So what about your mom and dad, Chris, growing up in South Florida? What kind of jobs did they have? Your dad didn't have anything to do with the broadcast industry. What kind of professions was your parents involved in?
Yeah, that would have been nice to have a dad who was an announcer to kind of help get me in the door. But,
yeah.
Not everybody has that. And so, look, you have different ways. I think it makes you stronger to have found a way on your own to do the job. And my dad actually worked a second job. At one point, he was in the auto industry. Then he was with the Postal Service. So we had a big family and didn't have a lot of money. My mom helped to take care of all the kids. So I was kind of the middle child, 2 brothers, 2 sisters. But my dad did have a military background. He had served in the Navy during World War II and was at the Normandy invasion and spoke a lot. There's a lot of pride in that, discipline, and grateful for his time in the service and for those that served. So there was a little bit of that influence of a work ethic. And I think so. Like, you know what, and follow your passion and your dream. He had a chance to do something as a singer with a Bing Crosby sing-along way back in the day. And he took a different route, to have the family and to serve in the military. And not that he regretted that, but I think it influenced him in the sense to tell his kids, and he wasn't even a great sports fan. He wasn't anti. but he just was so busy with other things. He was emphasizing, do a good job, get good grades. But I think he encouraged us, his children, to make sure follow your dream, to follow your passion, but also your talent. Make sure you know that you have the talent to follow your dream and your passion. And that was kind of the influence. But definitely the hard work, be on time, get along with people, do more than the job is required. That kind of influence, that came from my mom and dad and from my brothers and sisters who were very supportive.
So they were all supportive, but at any point in time, was there ever a suggestion of like, hey, Chris, this is kind of like, one in a million kind of make this their living? Maybe you should study something else in school to fall back on. Any that conversation ever had with you?
Not really. My dad, he did stress when I would be watching sporting events, he would say, hey, you should be up, on the news, make sure you're doing your homework, your current events. You got to be aware of some of the political. I was like, Dad, I'm 10. Relax here. But once he saw me enjoying radio, and I think I helped make him. Of course, he had a little more time in retirement afterwards. I think I made him more of a sports fan because initially I would try to talk sports, and he would say, hey, what about the presidential election or this? And then later, when I obviously made a career out of this, I'd call him and say, Dad, are you concerned about the election? He'd say, never mind that. How about those Dodgers? It looks like they're going to win the World Series. So things changed a little bit over time. So in an unusual way, I think he steered me. He gave me the tools, or at least my mom. They gave me the tools to kind of go the path I wanted. They never did discourage me, though. It was more just make sure you're well-rounded,
right.
Which has also helped in handling interviews and covering certain events in the book. I talk about how a sporting event can turn into a big news event on more than one occasion, almost Forrest Gump-like, and you got to be ready for that.
And talking about Chris Myers, the book is called That Deserves a Wow, Untold Stories of Legends and Champions. What was your very first job, Chris? Like maybe, very first job, maybe 12, 13 years old. What was your very first paycheck?
Yeah, it was a lawn service company that my dad, I wanted to make. First, I tried washing cars. That I didn't do as well with that around that age. And then he was like, well, there's a lawn service guy. You can work, part-time after school or weekends with this company. And I just knew that wasn't for me. That I think I was supposed to be, there was a client who had this, a doctor had this fancy house in South Florida, and I was supposed to be mowing, and I hit a strawberry patch, and I accidentally rolled through it with the lawnmower, and so they almost lost them as a client. So I was like, I'm not cut out for this kind of business. So and that's about the time too, when I was listening to sports radio and calling in on the radio show, and so I'm like, I better find a different path to make a living.
Who was the radio host that you called into?
Yeah, Sonny Hirsch, who became a legend later down in Miami, calling University of Miami football and basketball. He had a show called Sports Line on a 5,000-watt station in Miami Beach called WKAT. It was Cat with a K. It was kind of Mutual of Omaha Sports was on there as well. But they had their own local news talk format. They had they had a real estate show. They had a psychology show. It was kind of a cool format for way back then.
Wow. So this book, I really want to check this out over the holiday because it seems like a cool read. Not only, your career in sports broadcasting, some of the friends that you made, famous friends along the lines, which I always find interesting to find out about. But there was something in there that caught my attention, and that was you mentioned the loss of your 19-year-old son in a car accident. And, when I read this, it just, it got me to my core, and I could only imagine something that you had to go through. Was this something important for you to write about, to get out to? Was it therapeutic for you to put these words down?
Yeah, it wasn't so much therapeutic because it's difficult to talk about and even write about. But I thought if I was going to write a book about things that influenced my view and in sports, and I talk about people in sports who have lost, whether it's Dale Earnhardt, with Dale Earnhardt Jr., losing his father, and then Rick Hendrick, NASCAR owner, champion owner, who lost his son. I thought it was important for me to at least, and my family's very private about that. I always wanted to make it about the game and the guest, and they're the story, not me. But in this case, it kind of became the story. But I bring it up because I was just, and my family, so grateful for the outpouring of support from people in all sports, and all personalities. Of course, Fox Sports was outstanding, some of the old ESPN friends, but also strangers, people I didn't know, just the caring and I want people to know that there's hope out there in a desperate moment if there's a tragic loss that's so unexpected. And you're at your darkest point, that there are people there that they don't have to say or do anything, but they just let you know that they're there. And that meant a lot. And I don't know that we all or I could have made it through that without that kind of support. And that's why I felt it was important to share that, because everybody deals with loss. It's just how and when and how you respond to it.
Yeah, it's very, very comforting to hear something relatable coming from those we admire from, TV or, sports or the media. So very important and very, very brave of you as well. That deserves a wow. Untold stories of legends and champions. How about a career highlight? I mean, I don't want to date you. 40-year career here, man?
Yeah, when you're interviewing Ali in the 70s and Tom Landry and Roger Staubach, and then you're later interviewing Joe Montana, and you even have, of course, retired guys, but like Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas, and then you're at the Super Bowl covering Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. So to span those are just some of the football guys. But there's baseball and NBA. Wilt Chamberlain was a fascinating interview to sit and talk with him. Kobe Bryant. Just some really interesting, Dennis Rodman, interesting people that there's no favorite, and I really appreciate. That's why I dedicated the book to people I've worked with and for through the years, but also those that I've interviewed, because they were in thick and thin, gracious enough in tough moments, in victory and in defeat to spend time in the interview. But a lot of great personalities that people know, and I think it's relatable. I think, and my whole theory in doing interviews was treat a famous person like a regular guy, and a regular guy like a famous person. And that way, you're not intimidated, but you also don't overlook anybody. And I think you get the most out of them, what they want to reveal. And I think people appreciate that.
Pete Rose, Hall of Fame, yes or no? What? Come on, tell me.
I changed on this one. At the time, I covered that with Bart Giamatti. I was there with Pete when the news first came down for ESPN. And I was like, hey, this is terrible. I get the punishment. No, it should have. Now, Hall of Fame absolutely deserves to be in. You can put all kinds of notes around it if you want. He deserves to be in there. The
greatest hitter that ever lived, as far as I'm concerned, and one of the greatest sports broadcasters, Chris Myers. That deserves a wow. Untold stories of legends and champions. A true pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Always a fan of talking to radio guys, not only because, that's what I do, but just they're great interviewees. They listen, they answer, they don't ramble and go on or not answer the question altogether. So I can really appreciate talking to guys like Chris Myers, who is a legendary sports broadcaster. I found it very interesting to know that when he was a little kid, he would call into a radio show in Miami and had like a shtick prepared. Now, this is something that is, if you don't know this about sports radio, let me tell you about a movie called, I think it's called Big Fan, and it stars Patton Oswalt, and it basically shows you this fan of the New York Giants that calls into this sports show, which is hosted by the great Scott Farrell. And as he calls into this sports show, you see the guy reading from a piece of paper with a prepared statement or, shtick or rant. And before I saw that, I had no idea that worlds existed. So I can visualize Chris Myers as a young guy writing down a whole page of some kind of rant about some particular sports situation or person or team and calling into the radio station and reading it verbatim. So I think that's pretty cool. His first job, however, washing cars, he said that didn't go well. And then his dad got him in a lawn service, which didn't go well either because he backed the lawnmower over some bushes. So I guess his career there didn't last long. His family very supportive of his choice of becoming a radio broadcaster, an announcer. I have to say his big break probably came in the late 80s when he got got the gig onto ESPN, a major national television network. You know, going from a local radio station to that is kind of a big deal. You got a lot of eyeballs now on you and a lot of opportunities to do some big stuff. And he said his father was supportive. I guess his dad was a military man, which he made note of. And he also made note of his dad was in a Bing Crosby tribute band early on in his life. So following your dreams and doing stuff like that was encouraged by his dad, who I guess did not continue his dream of being in a Bing Crosby tribute band as he, you know, went off into the military, had a job in the automotive business, then again with the Postal Service, and, you know, lived a regular life, bringing up a family in Miami with 5 kids and a wife who stayed at home. I found the topic of his son passing away in a car accident at the age of 19 very interesting. And, you know, that was actually like a bullet point in, you know, the book. And obviously a big thing in his life that he felt the need to write about, even though he said it was hard to talk and write about, which obviously we can all understand. This would probably be a great read over the holidays. That deserves a wow. Untold Stories of Legends and Champions. Chris Myer's legendary sports broadcaster, my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber. And thank you so much for listening. All past guests and episodes are on celebrityjobber.com. You can follow on Instagram, which is celebrityjobber_podcast, youtube.com/the@celebrityjobber. Streaming everywhere you listen to podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of them. So please subscribe. Would love a 5-star rating and leave a review. Who knows what Chris Myers would have ended up doing if not for his big break? Well, he probably would have been a local radio guy, making a decent living and traveling from city to city. That's what happens. You get fired in one place, you pop up somewhere new, and you have to learn a new town and a new culture, and it's a pretty interesting lifestyle. Trust me. That'll do it for this week's episode of Celebrity Jobber. Thanks again for listening, and until next week, we'll see you then. I'm Jeff Zito.